Hello, everybody. Welcome. This is Legacy Cup. It's number 6 in 2025. This is pretty fantastic. It's pretty fabulous. I remember Legacy Cup 1, and it would have fit in this area. So it is fabulous to see how much it has grown, and we are very happy to be here. So today, the Minnesota Craft Cannabis Guild is providing some educational panels.
Please sign up for our events.
Yeah. So we have our signage all throughout the grounds today, and there are the signs just have facts about cannabis throughout history and throughout Minnesota on them. And the QR code will take you to our website. Sign up. So our first panel today is from roots to shoots. We're going to talk about how we cultivate our cannabis and how we feed it. So without further ado, we can get the panel started. And I'll have our panelists introduce themselves, and we'll go forward from there. So thank you, everybody, and here we go.
Hello, my name is Holden. I'm with a company called Sustane Natural Fertilizer. We are an organic fertilizer and soil amendment company located in Cannon Falls, Minnesota. So we started in the late 1980s. We make organic granular fertilizers from aerobically composted turkey litter and other natural nutrients. So we do a 6-month composting process, dehydrate it, and granulate fertilizers. We service a lot of different markets, horticultural markets, landscape, agriculture, erosion control, but it's fun to be here now that lifelong hobby is finally allowed to do, so happy to be here.
Hey guys, I'm Nick Holman with the HGV Nutrients. We are a dry format salt mine. High frequency feeds with high ECs.
Northern California nutrient company, and we now have a representative of the company living up here in Minnesota, and that happens to be my son. Some of you may know him, Malin. I'm super proud of him. He's representing the company well. We have 21 certified organic products, all registered in the state of Minnesota as well. And we're looking forward to the recreational market getting a boost now that the state of Minnesota is recognizing.
Stephan Cornell from Cornell Urban Agriculture. We've been, competing in Legacy Cup for years, and we've won a couple cups, one for CBD flower, one for our space ice cream for most innovative. And I'm here kind of representing our new venture, and that's, we've not only been, graced with, a great response from the crowd and, a big following for our flower, but, we've decided to take that regenerative agriculture and take our living soil mainstream. And so here kind of announcing that, we're scaling that up for the masses. We've had a few people even competing today on the home grow that'll be using our soil. We had a second place last year with Justin, and we had the first place Doobie Dabbler, so it's great to see people using our products and having success, and we're really looking forward to taking that to the commercial markets and starting to expand our methods and our blueprint to other farms, and make that accessible along with our soil, so we can help establish a craft organic market that's using local regenerative products here in Minnesota. So appreciate you guys having me.
What's the name of your new venture?
Well, it's still going to be Cornell Urban Agriculture.
Oh, wonderful.
But we're launching our Cornell Super Soil, so it's the same living soil that I use. It's been an evolution I've been working on for about 13 years and 5 commercially. And it's basically a water-only mix. We only use 3 different teas typically throughout the process, otherwise it's just straight water. It's a fully living, decomposting soil that's alive, that's breaking down in real time, and it's basically a time release so that, for instance, more of the nitrogen is going to be released at the beginning of the process to help the structure of the plant, and those, nutrients and vitamins and minerals that are going to assist that, and then you're going to see more of the phosphorus and more of the cannabinoid production nutrients start to release later throughout the decomposition. So basically the grower doesn't need to do anything. It's already following a flow, a natural flow of the plant, and that's basically designed into our product, and into our soil. And that was my goal, to just make it pretty much a water-only mix, make it really easy for everybody to have a really high-end craft quality product, with the diversity and, the quality that people would expect, out of a commercial product, but with all that, additional microcannabinoids that we're seeing from the diversity in the soils, and, that different expression of the terpene profile, that people really are attracted to. And we're here to, try and show, how valuable that product is in the market. And we're trying to establish that, that we've got deep roots here in Minnesota for that type of a product. That's what we want, and, that's what we're trying to help provide.
Awesome, thank you. I'll stand over here by my microphone instead. Over there. Thank you for the introductions and for describing what it is that you're doing and bringing to the table. So I've heard a couple of different methodologies described up here. And Stephan, you just described the living soil aspect of growing and did a pretty decent job of that. I'm going to move this out so it's not in front of that, otherwise we're going to get some feedback. And so I'd like to hear from some other panelists what that process looks like. Anyone want to volunteer for that, to describe their particular process? Excellent. Thanks, Brian.
So I work with a lot of living soil growers, and we have a bunch of different styles of approaching organic cannabis. And the biggest thing that I like to incorporate into all styles of growing is using organic NPK with beneficial microorganisms. So we're big on compost teas and worm castings, compost humus, and then we amend a lot of our products with guanos. We're not really big on bone meal, feather meal, blood meal. Those type of amendments tend to have different times of being released, and they have their time and their place. Ours is a little bit more directed. Our liquids feed the beneficial microorganisms as well as feeding the plant at the same time. And then our dry products are guano-based mainly. And then we also do biochar blends and compost tea blends that all have super high counts of beneficial microorganisms, specializing in fungi to help break down phosphorus and other nutrients and micronutrients to make NPK more available to the plant. Kind of like crop steering, but on an organic level, where you're using the microorganisms to free up the NPK and the micros of all the other nutrients. That's our approach, incorporating soil food web with organic NPK.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And next up.
So our nutrient line is a salt predominant line. We get raw materials brought in, and through those raw materials we mix and manufacture everything in-house in LA and Vernon, California. This is a salt nutrient line, so it is a complete nutrient line. There is no necessity to add any additives or bring anything else into the mix. We are predominantly in an inert media source, whether that's cocoa, whether that's rock wool. It is compatible with organics as well. A lot of our raw inputs are actually mined materials, so they're not coming from, there's generally two different methods to synthesize raw materials, whether it's the Mannheim method or homogenization, and a majority of our raw inputs are all mined materials. So that actually makes it very compatible with a lot of organics as well. And so with some of our customers that are sowing in ground or, amending soil or doing some sort of amendment or organic input, what we'll do is we'll actually take a look at your soil analysis, and then we'll adjust our program based on your soil analysis. That way it can be as compatible and as tailored and catered to what you're looking at. But it is a 3-part nutrient line, so it's a 2-part per stage with the calcium nitrate as our base fertilizer. The calcium nitrate is used in conjunction with either the grow or the flower, depending on stage of life. We generally recommend feeding at a higher EC, so pushing around a 3.0. Depending on where your environmentals sit or how hard you're pushing your plants, that's when we'd recommend to increase that EC by about 10 to 20%. But it's all catered to the grower themselves, and then through our support at the same time, we work hand in hand from an agronomy aspect on how can we maximize output, quality, while still maintaining a clean quality product as well.
So, as I mentioned, Sustane manufactures organic fertilizers derived from compost. So we operate a compost facility here in Minnesota. All our materials go through a 6-month aerobic composting process. That's really the foundation for Sustane and where a lot of the performance comes from. So through that 6-month process, we're breaking down organic materials, concentrating nutrient sources. We generate large populations of beneficial microorganisms and create a rich humus for organic soil building. And then we'll take that compost and we dehydrate it at a low temperature to preserve the microbiology, and we make a granular organic fertilizer. And you know, the big benefit, one of the big benefits is we take organic nutrients and make them more plant available through the composting process. So there's a certain percentage that's immediately available, water soluble nutrients. And then we also take some of the soluble nutrients that are common in organic materials and convert them to slow release. So it creates a very safe product and a very long-lasting product. Generally, especially with cannabis, you're going to be blending those granules into your living soil media, and you'll get an immediate response from the nutrients, and then you'll get a long-lasting response from the slow-release nutrients. And then in addition to that, you're going to have a wide variety, high diversity of microorganisms that help cycle those nutrients. So we're really kind of focusing on soil health, nutrient cycling, and we see tremendous results from what we call the unknown growth factor, or those microorganisms and how they benefit the plant. One other aspect through composting and the diversity of microorganisms is you get a pathogenic suppression effect. So by adding a large variety, diverse variety of microorganisms to your soil, you're outcompeting some of those pathogenic microbes that can take over and keeping the pathogen suppression down. So it's a very safe product. It's based on university research. We've done over 500 studies on different crops and different plants to show the efficacy and the safety aspect of it. So.
Right on. Thank you very much for the descriptions of how each one of your methods is applied. And it's fascinating that we, as home growers in Minnesota, can use any of these methods. And I use a super soil method just because I'm kind of lazy. I just want to water it. That's all I want to do. Water it, dry it, smoke it, then I'm good. So that's my typical approach. But it's exciting to think that I have multiple options and I have ways to amend my soil whenever I need to. What are some of the typical ways that a plant tells you what it needs? In particular, what I mean is we've talked a lot about releasing nutrients at particular times. That's been a part of these discussions and descriptions, is nutrients are releasing at times to do specific things for the plant. Let's say it starts to exhibit some problems, or you notice in your plants at scale where you're growing a deficiency of sorts. What sort of things would you look for in a nutrient deficiency? Let's say nitrogen, for instance, a nitrogen deficiency in your vegetative state. what would you do? You can you start.
Yeah, so one really nice thing about organic fertilizers is that there's a wide range of different nutrients available, and through a composting process you're concentrating those nutrients, so you have high levels of calcium and magnesium and all the micronutrients. So one easy thing about growing with organics is you get a lot of that micronutrients into the soil in the beginning and can avoid some of those problems. You don't have to try to figure out what you're short on or adjust your formula as you go. Depending on the material and how much you apply, you could certainly see some nitrogen deficiency, yellowing of the leaves, especially the top growth, the new growth. If those are turning yellow, that's probably an indication that you have a nutrient deficiency. We make a organic water-soluble product that will feed throughout the growing cycle if nitrogen is a concern, so you can add additional organic soluble nitrogen to kind of get that immediate correction. And then we have a few different formulas that are higher in different analysis, potassium and phosphorus, so you can apply those at flowering stage.
Same question.
Yeah, same question.
Yeah, same question about nutrient deficiency and how you notice it, what the plants are telling you, and then how do you correct it using the methods that you have.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so I think number one is trying to diagnose exactly what you're seeing, because what I've learned over the decade that I've cultivated is eyes can be deceiving, and what can potentially look like a deficiency could actually be caused by a toxicity. And the best rule of method and best methodology to really figure out what is going on is through analysis and through testing. Whether this is tissue testing, whether this is soil testing, if you're running organics, ideally what you're looking at is there's about 3 different types of soil analysis that you can look at, whether it's the Malic 3, the total nutrient analysis, or saturated paste test. And ideally what you'd be looking at is the Malic and the total nutrient analysis. Total is going to show you what's available over time. The Malic is going to show you what's available today and right now. And then whether you're doing a tissue analysis or a sap analysis, that's going to give you an understanding of, tissue is going to tell you what is it uptaken over its period of life. And then a sap analysis is what's available as we speak and as we're talking right now. So conducting these tests alongside a nutrient analysis or even a runoff analysis is really going to tell you whether or not you have a deficiency or in reality there could be a toxicity, because from a nitrogen perspective, if you're yellowing from the bottom moving its way up, that is a telltale sign of nitrogen. But what that could also mean is that could mean that you're low on it could mean that you're low on calcium, it could mean that you're low on copper, it could be that you're low on zinc, because all 3 of those other elements could play an effect in uptake and translocation of nitrogen. So it's really trying to dig in and dive into what is happening. And additionally, 9 out of 10 plant health issues are typically derived from environmental factors. So how stable the environment or how unstable the environment is. If you're getting a lot of humidity swings, temperature swings, that's going to play a drastic role in translocation, where you could potentially see spotting. You could think that you have a deficiency when in reality everything is balanced, whether it's your soil, whether it's your nutrient composition, everything is actually balanced, but you have an imbalance in environmentals that's causing overtranspiration, that's causing a number of other effects. So it's really just trying to dive into exactly what is happening and to be mindful. There's a lot of charts online. This is what this deficiency is. This is what, potash, phosphorus, zinc, iron, sulfur, you name it. They have visual signs of what that could be. But there's a lot more that's behind the scenes that could be affecting what's going on here.
Same question. Yeah, we'll just keep on keeping on right down the road, because it's 4 different methods that are, and so I want to hear. That's right. Thank you.
So one thing I always say is there is an organic solution for every product. Obviously, the best case scenario in the cultivation scenario is to avoid getting deficiencies. So part of having proper nutrient schedule, proper nutrient availability in the soil and media, so on and so forth. but you know, things happen. Let's be real. So for a deficiency in nitrogen, the first thing I would look at would be doing some testing. I'm big on soil and tissue testing. We work with a lot of pretty big facilities that, you know, can't afford to let things go south for too long. Tissue testing gives you answers within a couple days of where exactly that plant sits right now with available nutrient, and then the soil is, you know, a good backup. And then, you know, you want to adjust both. So, and when I do a soil test, I don't not only look at NPK and calciums and minerals and pH, we look at the biology also. So first thing I would do in a nitrogen deficiency, I would do a foliar spray with probably something like a fish powder, which is a high nitrogen, 15%, 80% amino acid, and then I'd probably combine that with calcium and magnesium that's very soluble and available, and then maybe kelp for a sea mineral, for the minerals from the sea, and then some potassium. I might even combine that with a general aerobically aerated compost tea that has a really high number of, you know, beneficial bacteria, fungi, protozoa, and nematode. This way you're getting the biology to help break down the NPK and minerals and make it more available. And you could do a foliar and a root drench with both. So that would be my first approach. And then I'd probably follow up with a potential top dress of some kind of high nitrogen powder. My favorite go-to is backwater, 6% nitrogen, very available, very soluble. And then every time you water a tea or some sort of a liquid nutrient, or even if it's just straight water, you're getting residual. So for a good 10 days, you're breaking that down, whatever was left on the top of the soil, making it available. And all these things work in a living soil situation just as well as like a small pot. Like I see, being in California where cannabis is like huge, and there's everyone has a huge grow or a small grow or this size or that size. There's 101 ways to skin a cat, and I never tell anyone what they're doing is wrong, and I try to help them adjust what they're doing to make it work better for them, because they're faced with challenges based upon their facility and what is like on site. So you can't just go into a place and say, oh, you're doing this all wrong. You need to raise beds, and you got to throw these benches away, and you need LED lights, not HPS lights. So I always like to, you know, put myself in their shoes, try to think about, you know, like if I was in their shoes and I was faced with this situation, what's the most affordable way? What makes the most sense? What's safe? What works? So I think that all needs to be considered when assessing any sort of situation.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Yeah, same question. You know, fortunately, you know, we've kind of designed a system in with living super soil. Basically, what we're doing is mimicking nature. So everything's operating just like it would operate in nature. So if you were out on a hike after a storm, you might see a tree knocked over. That tree is going to smash some plants below it. Those are going to kill those. You're going to find animals kind of fighting over that area, and blood and bones are going to shed. You know, the worms are going to disperse that. You're going to see fungi rising out of that decomposition, and you're going to find a flourishing life, you know, come the following spring, you know, if you ever notice that. And so basically what we're doing is we're replicating that with the industries in different areas where you might have a cow farm in one area or a corn farm in another area. Everything's basically isolated. And so I believe that a lot of that nature is taken away just because it's isolated like that. It's causing problems and stopping the decomposition. So as we bring all that stuff together, we're just replicating nature, and all the microorganisms and fungi are already present on a lot of that nature. And so with our soil, you don't really need to do anything, just like you don't need to necessarily feed, you know, the forest or anything, because it naturally cycles. And so with our living super soil, if you were to have a nitrogen issue or a suspected nitrogen deficiency in the vegetation cycle, I get that question a lot with a lot of the people, customers and growers that use our soil, and it's typically going to be simplified down to a few things, and that is your light intensity, how far away your light is, how intense it is, your humidity, your temperature, and then your watering. And so typically you're just going to be overwatering or you're going to be underwatering, and it's pretty much that simple, because if it doesn't have enough water, it's not able to transport those nutrients. If it doesn't have the right humidity, just like if you're jogging and sweating and it was really humid, it's not going to really, it feels really stuffy, it's not cycling very well. If you're in a cooler, drier environment, you know what I mean, it's going to be cycling, cooling you off. And so the plant works the same way, as it releases and opens the stomata, it releases moisture, that evaporates, that cools, that creates a colder temperature, and that creates a pressure zone by the plant. And that pressure zone of it being cooler is going to want to equalize and with the warmer air around it. And so that causes a negative pressure, and that actually draws moisture up out of the soil. So it's important to know that your humidity is correct so that it can properly evaporate and properly prime the pump, you know, to be cycling these things. So it's pretty much when you have all your nutrients already there for the whole cycle in the living soil, and it's just breaking down, the only other factor is going to be the microorganisms. And so sometimes if it's been too wet or it's been too dry in the soil, the microbial populations or the fungi populations might die off. So, you know, what we recommend after that is going to be something like a tea. And so we take water and some worm castings or compost or alfalfa or things like that. In this case, with the nitrogen deficiency, I would do some alfalfa powder, ground up alfalfa. That's going to be nitrogen rich, quick release, and then we add that with, the worm castings. I like to use some crushed up barley, malted barley for all the enzymes, and that's going to increase the nutrient cycling. And it's basically like sugar for the plants and for the microbes, and so they flourish faster, and so your tea brews faster, typically in about 12 hours, and then we just apply that, basically re-inoculate a bunch of these fresh formed microbes and fungi, and then we're going to just apply that to each pot, re-inoculate, bring the life back to it. Those are our workers. They're just going to go back to work breaking down the soil, and then your job is just to keep that watering, at a better level, typically, if that was one of the issues. Or recently, I was getting aggressive, just putting too much light on the plant, trying to go higher performance, and you get a nitrogen deficiency from too much light. And so in that case, you got to back it off a little bit, and know that that's the case. But, you want to be, re-inoculating those microbe populations, having proper watering, and, you're typically not going to have any issues if your environment lighter the right way. So, pretty simple.
That's fantastic. Thank you all for answering that question. It's one that comes up often online in different growing forums. It comes up in the growers meetups that I host, and often I explain all of those factors, and sometimes it can be overwhelming for people. They're like, that's like everything. I gotta check everything? Yeah, you do. You gotta check everything. It grows like a weed if you know how to grow it. And so, thank you for describing that particular process. One of the other questions I might have would be, oh goodness, how do each of your processes piggyback on each other? I know it's been brought up multiple times where it said this will work with living soil, this will work with this. Describe a little bit about how that would work. Let's say, how does it work? How do your particular products work in a living soil situation? Like how does that all work together? So let's start. We'll do it in the same order. Thank you.
That's an excellent question. One of the benefits to the organic fertilizers, as I mentioned, is you have a wide variety of nutrients, both macro and micronutrients, and you can blend that into the soil with a slow release, composted, organic. It's very safe. You can add it to the soil on the front end, and you kind of get your baseline of all your different nutrients. So you know you've got everything that you need in that pot. And the question then becomes, at what point does it become plant available? And one of the challenges with organics versus a fully salt-based program is you don't have complete control over that availability. And so one way that a high-quality organic can work well with some of these other products is you get your baseline nutrients at a very affordable price, and you get those in the soil, and then throughout the growing season you can spoon feed with soluble nitrogen, or you can use some CalMag or something if you see different deficiencies. We've also talked a bit about compost tea, and if you're using a living soil or organic fertilizer, adding a compost tea through the cycle will help add those microorganisms to the soil, which will break down the nutrients and convert them to plant available form. So it may be that you have the nutrients in the soil and then you just need to unlock them. So you could either use an organic living soil and then you can feed throughout with a soluble nitrogen, or you can use an organic living soil and then add a compost tea to release more of those nutrients that are bound up in the soil.
Yeah, so I'll kind of touch again on the soil testing that I discussed earlier. Ours is a salt-based line, so it is readily available nutrients that have either been chelated down, on our micros, or just readily available on our macros and secondary. So in all reality, with our line, in a commercial setting, with people that are using intermediates such as cocoa or rock wool, they're not necessarily going to be adding an additive or any sort of organics into that situation, mainly for cleanliness and mainly for just consistency at the same time. Now with that said, we do work with a lot of outdoor farms that like to amend their soil, whether they're sowing in ground like I said, or in large 60 to 120 gallon pots. And what we do when we work with those customers is we look over their soil analysis alongside them. And we take the two different types of samples, which is the Malin 3 I discussed earlier, along with the total nutrient analysis. We overlay them side by side because, again, what we're looking for is what is available now and what is available long term. That way we can adjust our feeding strategy and our EC strategy based on that soil analysis, and then we can accommodate that with supplemental feeding, whether that's once a week, twice a week, once every other week. Really depends on how hot the soil is. Now, with that said, in a indoor facility in an inert media, when it comes to organics, what it really is going to boil down to is, especially depending on what the market you're in, if your market is going really well, your price per pound is very high, your cost per pound is fairly comparable, and you're able to afford an additive, then by all means go ahead and go with it. Now, if you're looking at a market like California, Arizona, Michigan, that are sort of on the downslope at the moment, cost per gallon and cost per pound is something that is being very mindful of at the moment. So when it comes to organics, it can add an additional cost. And so my philosophy with any of our customers is, look, you're going to do what you want to do. And secondly, an additive or organics are only going to do one of three things. It's either going to get better, get worse, or stay the same. Those are the only three outcomes that can happen from an additive or implementing something else to your nutrient regimen or nutrient program. And if that gets better, what it's going to boil down to is cost. Is the outcome outweighing the cost of that input? Are you getting a higher price per pound? Are you getting more biomass that's going to equate to higher revenue? That is what it's really going to boil down for us in our situation. But again, implementing our nutrient line with an organic line is completely compatible given the raw inputs that we use being mined. It's just a matter of doing the due diligence and doing the testing. What we're going to try to avoid is over fertilizing at that point. Whether it's organic or synthetic, over fertilization is what we want to try and avoid, and we want to have a proper balance, because if you are over fertilizing your soil, it could create an imbalance in the substrate, which could throw off the pH, which then will throw off the availability of elements that the plants are actually able to translocate and uptake. So it's all about finding that balance and finding that happy medium. And the best advice I could give is just proper testing.
I agree with him on the testing again. Always, science is definitely an important part of this whole thing. The one thing I was going to say before answering the living soil part of it, back to what he was talking about as far as using his salt-based nutrients, biology helps chemistry also. So, dollars and cents aside, biology is going to make chemistry go further. So at the end of the day, it 99 times out of 100 will pencil out. And making compost tea is not a very expensive act. And especially once you get your system down, you get your supplies down and they're the proper ones, you don't need a lot of things, you just need them to be the right things. And you just need to, make it correctly and apply it correctly. And compost tea is a really great component to any grow, no matter what you're doing. I work with many grows that are 100% salt, and the only thing they may do is compost tea. And other than their salt, regular base, it goes through some fancy dosing systems. And then I also have a full living soil, customer that will want to do a compost tea, add fish to the end, and the compost tea at the very end. Fish feeds fungi. Fungi is a very important component of breaking down all those things in this guy's soil or anybody's soil for that matter, because without fungi, phosphorus isn't going to be able to be assimilated, and it also is just going to speed up the entire nutrient cycle. So the approach of feeding your plant while you feed the soil is just so in my head that it's just such common sense. If you have the opportunity to use a simple system that is affordable, that brings out the best elements of cannabis or peppers or whatever it may be, then why not go that approach? If you could feed your soil, be a minimalist, feed your plant at the same time, use that same soil day in and day out for 10, 15 years, if that's your technique. Or you could use the same technique in a 2-gallon pot, and it could be straight cocoa. So, the ability to apply this style of growing can be scaled, huge, or super concentrated on a small level right on your back porch. And that's what I think is simple about incorporating the soil food web with organic NPK. Biology and chemistry go hand in hand. Anyways,
That's fantastic. Thanks, Brian. I'm a pretty big advocate for going straight organics personally, but I do have there's quite a few respectable organic soil growers that that I look up to that definitely use salts later in the stage, might add phosphorus later in the flowering stage, or maybe week 5, 6 to start stacking some phosphorus on there. There is some new data study that I've read that that shows there isn't a huge advantage of stacking phosphorus, but my approach with our soil has always just been using the slower degrading phosphorus so that it just takes a longer time for that to kind of open up and release, so that we typically have enough. But to Brian's point, and Nick's point, there's the compost teas are just where it's at. The salt guys are really taking it to the next level. I know that I've seen a lot of them getting a lot higher hash results, getting a lot higher terpene results, because it's tough to really believe that the world, that life, revolves around 66 different nutrients, and that's all that we need to sustain life. So, I'm really excited to see a lot of the salt guys and the commercial farms using teas, and I highly recommend those in there, just to add that, that extra diversity, that is needed. Although I'm a big part of my mix is into the flavor aspects of it. So, when you talk about, mixing different processes or different things, one of the toughest part about organics is that, they can contribute positively or negatively to the flavors. And so you know, the one thing that you want is to, you know, have the right amendments that are gonna give you the flavors that you want, because, you know, if you're using like chicken manure, for instance, that's gonna provide a different flavor, you know, than a guano, or, you know, I mean, every nutrient, you know, ends up contributing in a certain amount of flavor profile to it. And so I like to personally kind of look at it like like you're a chef, and, you know, if you've ever seen Iron Chef, like they got their main, you know, fish or meat or protein or whatever, they're centering their dish around, and, you know, to me that's straight in cannabis, and, you know, I want to kind of, you know, use flavors that are gonna accentuate the profile of that particular genetics, you know what I mean, or, you know, do that in a general way. And so the way, you know, we design that into the soil is basically through, you know, through adding, you know, more of a creamy, buttery type flavor, you know, just like you would in a dish, because the creamy, buttery flavors aren't going to interfere with a lot of different smells. And then, you know, they also will add a little bit of linalool on there and encourage a little bit of that, because on a small level, you know, that can kind of smooth out some of the pungent smells or some of the peppery smells that are sometimes off-putting, you know, for certain genetics to people. And so with that kind of floral linalool, we can kind of tailor that down and minimize it, you know, and then we can, you know, increase kind of the richness and the flavor profile, you know, of whatever that we're working with, you know, with more of these kind of creamy, buttery flavors. And so to me, a lot of the nutrients is the timing, but it's also, you know, a lot about the flavor. So when it comes to mixing different things, you know, you can, you know, I love, you know, experimenting with that, but it definitely takes a lot of time. I love hearing growers' different feedbacks when they're adding different stuff to our soil in there, but I've added a lot, and it's, you know, it's tough to beat after, you know, a decade and a half or so. But you know, I love, you know, trying new things and new manures. I've had a lot of, you know, our geneticist Yellowhammer was recommending some sheep and, you know, different sheep manures. So, you know, I love everybody using the different nature around them and applying that to, you know, their mixes. And, you know, that, you know, I think is, you know, the way that we can kind of move things forward and, you know, discover those new flavor profiles and new varieties that kind of nature is adding to it. And so, you know, that's what I'm really centered on, for sure.
All right, excellent. Thank you all very, very much. I appreciate you taking time out of your day at the festival today to come here and talk to us all about nutrients and plants and feeding them. And it is fascinating to me, all of the methods that we have available to us in order to do this. And all of them have strong merits and strong positives, and it's a wonderful way for Minnesotans to grow cannabis is exactly how they want to, and it's great that we get to, and I'm excited for the future of our state, that we can grow it at home, that we can grow it in small scale, that we can grow at large scale. We get to grow, so it's fantastic. So thank you, gentlemen, all for your time today. Much appreciated, and have a great rest of the day at the festival. Thank you. Bye.